All right, this is Todd Sharp, and this video here is going to be the first in a short series of videos and associated blog posts where I talk about running Grails on the Raspberry Pi. Um, coincidentally, I should say coincidentally that today is Pi Day, 3/14, but it wasn't intentional, but it's kind of a nice coincidence that we've got Pi Day today for the first video and the first blog post. But I wanted to do this short series to share a little bit about running Grails on the Raspberry Pi. This is something that I have done successfully in the recent past. I've got a Grails application running on a Raspberry Pi Model 3, and it has various sensors set up, and it's doing some automation out in my barn. So I have power out there and certain tasks that I want to accomplish, and I thought that what better way to do that than with a Grails application that I can access over the web. Right now I just access it locally on my home network, but if I wanted to, I could easily open up do some port forwarding on my router and open that up to the web so that I could even access it remotely. But for now, it works over the local host and does everything I need it to do, so I'm pretty happy with it. But I wanted to share because I think it's pretty cool. Raspberry Pis are very powerful little machines. This one that I have here is a Pi Zero version 1.3. I picked it up recently at Micro Center down in Atlanta, and these things are ridiculously tiny. Can't really see it that well through the package there. Let me open that up. So these things are ridiculously tiny. I mean, size of my finger, not even that big. So, but powerful. The Pi Zero, in this one in particular, is not quite as powerful as the Model 3, but what you give up in power, you gain back in the small form factor. So it has HDMI out. It has two micro USBs, one for power, one for just USB. This particular model doesn't have any onboard wireless capabilities, which is why you kind of get into adding some accessories. But you do have your 40 general purpose input output pins, so you can hook up sensors, all kinds of cool things. You have your camera ribbon connector, and yeah, that's about it. So cool little thing. Haven't used it yet, but I'm curious to see if I can run Grails on that. I think I'll probably give that a shot as part of this series. Only 500 megs of RAM, so a little underpowered compared to the Model 3. A lot underpowered, I would say, about half. But we'll give it a shot, see what happens. Some of the accessories that you need to get going is obviously you need an AC power supply. In this case, I've got a 5.25 volt, 2.4 amp micro USB supply, and again picked up at Micro Center. Obviously, all these things can be got on Amazon or any other. There's a ton of different sites out there for Raspberry Pis that you can order things from. The Pi Zero, $5 at Micro Center, and the charger, $9. So I've read things saying that you could use an old cell phone charger, but I like to make sure that you've got the right amount of volts and amps, so you're not underpowering and you're not frying the Pi. Wi-Fi, a little dongle here, picked up online. I think it was maybe $7-8, but that's how you can get your wireless capabilities on the Pi Zero, and a micro SD card, the 16 gig model that I got from Micro Center as well. Doesn't have a price on it, but I think it was around, again, $6-7. They're so cheap nowadays. So $5, $9, $14, $20. You're looking at under $30 investment here to get started. Now, one other thing. You also do need a micro USB hub. You don't have any full-size USB ports on the Zero, so if you're going to run, especially obviously if I even want to plug in my Wi-Fi dongle, I need a USB hub. So another $7-8 on Amazon, and you're looking at around $40. The alternative, if you wanted to go the full form factor route, is the Model 3. And in this case, this is a kit that I ordered on Amazon. It comes with the Pi 3 itself and a power supply. Again, the proper power supply for the unit. And the Pi 3 has 1 gig of RAM, has, I believe, 1.2 gigahertz ARM quad-core processor, onboard Wi-Fi, onboard Bluetooth, all kinds of awesome, cool things that you don't have to add externally, like the USB hub. You've got 4 USB out ports. So you're it's up to you how the investment you want to make. But this kit was 40, and the Pi Zero altogether the investment was about 40 as well. So depending on what you want to do with it and where you want to put it, obviously the choice is yours. So the next step in getting up and going is to install our operating system. And to do that, what I like to do is use a piece of software called Noobs, quite ironically named, but that stands for New Out-of-Box Software. And it's basically an installer that you can put on your SD card. You can download it, Google it and download it, and install it on your SD card. And once you throw that in your SD card slot and fire up the Pi, you will get prompted to install the OS. Typically the OS is Raspbian that I like to use. I've found that there are choices, but I've found that most of the help that you'll find online will be geared towards using Raspbian, so I kind of stick to that. Also, as you can probably see here in the video, I recently installed Debian on my laptop, so it helps me kind of feel comfortable with the operating system and make sure that I'm using a consistent OS that I feel comfortable with. So what I'm going to do is install the OS, get it up and running, and then I'll pick up the next segment here with right after that. It's kind of a dry really thing, and there's plenty of videos out there, so I won't exactly show that on video, but it's pretty straightforward and simple to do. So alright, we're back, and I've got Raspbian all installed on the SD card and running on the Pi Zero. So I just wanted to quickly come back and show you that. Let me get out of full screen mode here. So all we have to do now here is SSH into the Pi, and in this case I'm using the IP address that I have assigned to it in my router. So there's one of two ways. Obviously, if you're running DHCP, you're going to get a new IP address every time, and it's going to make it hard to SSH in unless you go into your DHCP client list in your router and see what an IP address was assigned, and that can be a real pain. So what I like to do is go into my router. I don't like to mess with static IPs. I go into my router, and by MAC address I reserve an IP address. So that's what I've done here. I've assigned 150 as my IP address for my new Pi. So just go ahead and SSH in, and I'm running console here on my Debian laptop. So that's what you're seeing here, and I'm SSHing into the Raspberry Pi. So here we go. I'm in, and if I do an uptime, you see we've been up for 4 minutes, and I can pretty much control anything that I need to over SSH here. The other option is to use VNC, which is a nice way to kind of remote into the machine and control it if you need to. So if I go ahead and do that, actually let me show you real quick the properties to illustrate one more thing. So in this case I'm connecting to via a host name, Raspberry Pi-2.local, and the nice thing about Raspbian is that it installs out of the box the Avahi daemon, which kind of broadcasts your local host name, so you could use that to connect. So if you didn't reserve the IP address, or didn't want to or couldn't, or for whatever reason, you can usually default to using the host name to connect. You could also do that with SSH. But just make sure you've got the host name. If you're running more than one Raspberry Pi on your local network, one of them is going to have to change the host name, and that's what I've done here because I've already got a Raspberry Pi.local on my local network. So I did have to change the host name, but that's not a problem. So if we go ahead and connect now, use our username and password, and go ahead and remember that. I hit OK. And if we give it a second, oh no, the password was incorrect. Maybe I typed it wrong. Try again. And there we go. All right. So I've remoted into the Raspberry Pi. We can see the CPU on the 0 kind of jumps around and goes a little crazy. This is my first time, like I said, messing with the 0. But I did want to show you something real quick that's kind of important for your first few times logging in. There is, under the little Raspberry menu here, there's a Preferences and a Raspberry Pi Configuration. So the first time when you've got your HDMI hooked up to a monitor and you install it and it boots up for the first time, you want to go ahead and come in here to the Interfaces tab, and I believe all of these are going to be disabled by default, but you absolutely want to enable SSH if you're going to use it, as well as VNC. I go ahead and enable them all just so I don't have to come back later and mess with them, but that's up to you. So yeah, like I said, enable VNC, enable SSH. Make sure you do that the first time you're plugged in to a monitor. Otherwise you're not going to be able to access it without an actual keyboard and mouse and monitor plugged in. So yeah, that's that. Go ahead and close VNC here. I should mention one other thing real quick. If we go back to the camera, so the HDMI port on the Pi Zero is actually a mini HDMI. I lucked out and did happen to have a mini HDMI cable, but if you do not have one of those, you want to make sure you go ahead and grab one before you try to hook that Pi Zero up to any display. So yeah, so that's that intro to Raspberry Pi. I know it was a little long and maybe a little dry, but thought it would be a good intro for those who haven't messed with the Raspberry Pi before. In my next post, in my next video, I'm going to start getting into installing Grails and running a Grails app and all the other cool things that I have planned to show you. So hope you enjoyed it. Alright, look forward to the next video and the next post.